week 7 in the fantasy football season, and his wide receivers start or sits in every matchup this week. The first matchup, New Orleans Saints at the Arizona Cardinals. So right here, the Saints, a lot of injuries at the wide receiver. Michael Thomas, we don't know if he's going to play in this game, but it's looking unlikely he is. But in case he does play, I would have him as a start. This Cardinals secondary isn't all that great. I know they just shut down Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, but they know what Seattle is about and the way that offensive runs, plays in that division and plays them obviously twice a season. But anyway, Michael Thomas, if somehow he plays in this game, I have him as a start, no matter if it's Andy Dalton or Jameis Winston at quarterback, because he's a wide receiver that could still be a playmaker. We saw it early in the season, but I just think he's a guy that's dogging it right now, and he don't want to play as Michael Thomas. So right here, if he does play in this game, what the chances are unlikely, I got him as a start. On the other hand, Chris Olave, who missed last week's ball game, he should be back in the playmaker. He goes up there and gets it. He can run the routes as Olave. And I think after this year, we're going to see Michael Thomas gone from New Orleans. This is just my opinion. And Olave be the number one wide receiver going into next season. So right here, he's a start. He's a perfect number 2 flex option each and every week, no matter the quarterback as well, especially if they're chasing points in this game here. He could have a big fantasy day, so I like him as a start, and he's off the injury report as well after coming off that concussion. Now to the sits here, Jarvis Landry, it looks like he's not going to play in this game, and even if he does, the last couple seasons, he's just been inconsistent. There's been many times where he would start a ball game, get banged up, and leave the game, and you just don't want to deal with it. So Jarvis Landry's a safe. Marquez Callaway, we know he's showed some plays and explosiveness for this offense, but he's another guy that's been inconsistent the first couple seasons here with the Saints, and I got him a sit. And Taekwon Smith, they've had high hopes for him over the last few seasons, going back to the Drew Brees days, but he really hasn't showed much. I know he scored a touchdown in last week's game, but he's another guy you just can't trust this week, so I got him as a sit. Now to the Arizona Cardinals side of things, Rondé Moore, he's going to step up with a bigger role this week here. The news has come out that Hollywood Brown's out 6 weeks. They went out and traded for Robbie Anderson right away after Anderson walked off the field, getting into arguments with his teammates in Carolina in Week 6. So right now, Rondé Moore, bigger role, I think, here. Deandre Hopkins, he's a guy that I said I would take a wait-and-see approach, but he, obviously with Hollywood Brown out now, these will be the top 2 targets in this Arizona Cardinal offense. And these are guys I'm going to start this week. This secondary over there in New Orleans, they're just giving up big plays, and Tyrann Mathieu might not even play in this ball game as well for the Saints. And now Robbie Anderson, he's a guy you probably should go out there and pick up for your fantasy team here with the news of Hollywood Brown going down, because they like to run a lot of 3 wide receiver sets over here in Arizona. And Robbie Anderson, in my opinion, does fit this offense well as a deep ball threat and a guy who can make some plays. So Robbie Anderson, you pick him up, you stash him on your bench this week, because I don't think we're going to see a lot of snaps for him, especially with him learning the playbook and with the short week here being Thursday Night Football this game. So I got him as a sit, but definitely keep an eye on Anderson. Now to the New York Giants at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Right here, Darius Slayden a couple weeks ago in Week 5 had a nice ball game versus the Packers, but he's a guy that's not really a number 1 wide receiver, and a guy who's been inconsistent throughout his NFL career. So I got him as a sit. And Richie James Jr. showed some flash the first few weeks of the season, but now he really hasn't done anything for this Giant team. Now to the borderline option, Waldé Robinson, the rookie receiver. He came back after missing the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season, and he was a running back / wide receiver in college, but now full-time wide receiver. But he's a guy that could use in many ways here is this New York Giant team. They need some speed. They need some playmakers besides Saquon Barkley. And with Tani hurt, Kenny Golladay banged up, and the team not really interested in playing him anyway here, I think Robinson's going to get opportunities. And he's a guy that I said is one of the best waiver wire pickups at receiver this week here. So if you got him, good for you. But anyway, this week here is a number 3 receiver in 3 receiver leagues or a flex option. I think he's a decent and borderline play this week. Now to the Jaguar side of things, Tristan Kirk, I got him as a start. The last couple weeks, 4 and 5, he didn't do much, but he found the end zone in Week 6, which was good to start. And each and every week, Kirk's a number 2, low-end 2 receiver for me. He's the number 1 man over there in Jacksonville. He's a playmaker, and they're feeding him the football. Now to the borderline options, Zay Jones and Marvin Jones. Zay Jones, he came back from injury. He didn't look all that great. Only 5 catches, 42 yards in that ball game. And this Giant defense, they've been playing good defense over the last few weeks. So right here, Giants coming in 5-1. Marvin Jones and Zay Jones, I don't think are great options, but if you're in a pinch, obviously, they're borderline options. I know Marvin a couple weeks ago came off a 100-yard game, and then last week surprisingly missed last week's ball game. But these are guys that are hard to trust even with the Bills on bye week, with their 2 wide receivers, and also with A.J. Brown and Devonte Smith on bye as well. Still borderline options with those 4 good receivers out this week. Now the next matchup, Indianapolis Colts at the Tennessee Titans. So Michael Pittman finally got over 130 yards in another decent matchup here at the Tennessee Titans. So Pittman this week is a number 2 wide receiver for your team. I think you can have confidence. So I got him as a start. And Alec Pierce, the last 3 weeks now, he's at double-digit fantasy points 3 weeks in a row in PPR leagues here, scoring the game-winning touchdown in Week 6 ball game in that shootout versus the Jaguars. So Pierce is a buy-in filler, pretty decent, but still in 2 receiver leagues and flexes, he's a borderline option, is Pierce. But deeper leagues, you're going to go out there and throw him out as a starter. But this week here to play it safe, because if he didn't score that touchdown, he didn't do anything last week. He's a borderline option. And now to the Titans side of things, we know Burks on IR. He's not going to play. Robert Woods, the last man standing over there. But Robert Woods, it's just been a down year for him. He's a touchdown-dependent wide receiver. If you don't get a touchdown, he's been maxing out at 6 or 7 fantasy points or even worse. So this week here, in a mediocre matchup versus the Indianapolis Colts, even though I think Stephon Gilmore is going to be on him, I don't want to deal with Robert Woods. Even with all these bye weeks, I got him as a sit. Now to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Carolina Panthers. So this Buc team, after coming off a horrible loss at the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think they're going to come out gunning and throwing that football early and often is Tom Brady. So Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, I know the last couple weeks the numbers haven't been great for these guys, but this week here in a division matchup and coming off a horrible loss in a game where they were big favorites at Pittsburgh, these guys are going to have big ball games, and you start them with confidence. This week, Russell Gage has a 3rd wide receiver. I thought he was having more of a role and catch more passes here in this offense, but it just hasn't come to fruition. So this week, Russell Gage, you got to see more out of him before you even have him as a borderline option to play this week. So I got him as a sit. And to the Panthers side of things, Robbie Anderson, he got traded out of town, obviously, to the Cardinals early in the week here. So DJ Moore, he's the number 1, obviously, and still always the number 1 in Carolina. But we don't know if it's going to be Jacob Eason or PJ Walker thrown to him. But it's a situation versus a good Bucs team where I don't want to deal with any of it. So DJ Moore, even with all these bye weeks and good receivers on bye, I got him as a sit this week, especially not putting up numbers this year. Now the Detroit Lions at the Dallas Cowboys. So right now, St. Brown, if he's back in this game, he's a guy you start each and every week. He's pretty much matchup proof. Him and Jared Goff have a great rapport. He's one of the better fantasy players at wide receiver over the last 10 weeks of the season, going back to last year, is St. Brown. So hold up during the bye week here, and he's good to go in this one at the Dallas Cowboys. If he plays, he's an obvious squeeze start. So DJ Chark, he's a guy, week 1 had a great ball game, and then the last couple weeks after that didn't do much. Then he missed a game or 2 with injury, and he just hasn't been putting up numbers. He don't really look for DJ Chark in this offense, so he's an easy sit this week. And that's Josh Reynolds. He's had 3 games in a row with double-digit fantasy days. Here's Josh Reynolds. So he's a wide receiver. He can run the routes. He's got yard after catch speed as well. And in this matchup versus Dallas, they could be chasing points. So as a 3rd receiver or flex option, I don't think Reynolds is the worst option in the world this week here. So if you need him with good receivers on bye, I got him in borderline. Now to the Cowboys side of things, it looks like Dak Prescott is going to suit up, and that'll open things up more for this offense, even though I thought Cooper Rush did a great job going 4-1, not turning the ball over. The only bad game was with the turnovers and not looking good at the Philadelphia Eagles. But right here, if Dak comes back versus weak Lions secondary that gives up tons of fantasy points to wide receivers, I think CeeDee Lamb could have his biggest game of the season here. So he's a definite start. And Michael Gallup, he's a guy I got to wait and see what he does. But if that comes back in this ball game, Gallup by next week could be a starting option as a 3rd receiver or a flex option. But this week here, we haven't seen much from Gallup. I don't know if he's 100% coming off that ACL. They might have rushed him back a little bit here. But I got him as a sit. But if that comes back for sure and Gallup looks good, then he's a guy that definitely could be a borderline or start option for weeks to come. Now to the next ball game, Green Bay Packers at the Commanders. So right now, in this one, Allen Lazard, he's the number 1, no doubt about it, over there in Green Bay. And now with the injury to Randall Cobb, who's going to be out for a few weeks here, there's going to be more targets to go around over there. So Lazardi's pretty much an each and every week start with him and Rodgers having a rapport. And the only guy doing anything, Romeo Doubs, I got him as a borderline option this week. He came out of the gates in week 3 with a big ball game versus Tampa Bay, but ever since, the numbers have gone down weekly here for Romeo Doubs. It was good to see 9 targets for Doubs in last week's ball game versus the Jets and Giants, though, in plus matchups. He just didn't do anything. So this week with a good matchup once again at the Commanders, I got him a borderline option. Now to the Commander side of things, we know Carson Wentz out 4 to 6 weeks with a broken finger he got surgery on, and I just don't like these guys. Even with Carson Wentz, they were questionable this week, but now with Taylor Heineke, I don't know if he's really going to spread the ball out and make some plays or do any worse than Carson Wentz or the same, because Wentz did have a few good ball games where he got a lot of garbage time points or whatever. But anyway, Terry McLaurin this week, he's a borderline option with Taylor Heineke, but he's a guy that's been obviously a bust in my opinion. The most we've seen out of him was 13 fantasy points, and the rest of the way anywhere from 8 to 10 in PPR leagues. So that's not going to get the job done for a guy who was drafted 3rd, 4th round for fantasy owners. And now with Taylor Heineke in there at quarterback, we'll see if anything changes. But this week at best, he's borderline. Now Curtis Samuel and Jahan Dotson, they're both sit options here for me. Carson Wentz had a good rapport with both of these guys for the most part. We don't know what they're going to do in this one with Taylor Heineke, and I got to take a wait-and-see approach. And Samuel, last week, he didn't do much of anything. Disappointing fantasy owners with only 2 fantasy points in that ball game, so they're easy sits this week versus a pretty decent Packer defense. Now to the Falcons at the Cincinnati Bengals. So Drake London, last couple weeks here, he just hasn't done anything here for fantasy owners. So right now, at best, he's a borderline option. I know with the bye weeks and stuff, people are probably going to play him. He's still the number 1 guy over there. They don't have much at wide receiver. They got Zakekis and Hodge, but those guys aren't fantasy relevant right now. So London here, you're probably going to play him, but don't have high expectations for him. He's a borderline option. Now to the Bengals side of things, Jamar Chase finally had that monster ball game, and he's fired up as a number 1 wide receiver here. It was good to see him score 2 touchdowns and go over 100 yards in Week 6 ball game in New Orleans. So you start him each and every week. And T. Higgins, I know it was a down game, but he came out of the ball game as of now unscathed, which is a good sign. After the last few weeks here, he's been banged up, is T. Higgins. So I got him as a start versus a weak Falcons secondary. And Tyler Boyd, a borderline option, and low-end number 2, 3 receiver for fantasy owners this week. But I think this Cincinnati Bengal team, they're going to throw the football all over the place. A lot of guys are going to get things going in this one. But Boyd is a borderline option, especially if Higgins feels even more healthy going into this ball game. Now the next game, Cleveland Browns at the Baltimore Ravens. Amari Cooper, it's been a pretty solid year for him, but I got him as a borderline option. His home road splits are ridiculous. On the road, even in his Cowboy days, he would just disappear as Amari Cooper and not do anything. But last week, the touchdown definitely bailed them out, or he only would have finished with 8.40 fantasy points. So this week here in the division matchup, grind out type of game in Baltimore, I got him as a borderline option, but most people obviously going to start him with the bye weeks and just the numbers in general that Cooper's been putting up. Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's starting to get going a little bit here for this Cleveland Brown team, but he's still a guy, even with the bye weeks, I can't trust as a guy I'm going to start, because we've seen it over the last couple seasons with Peoples-Jones. He comes off a good game, and then the next game or two, he disappears and he doesn't do anything. So this week here, I'm just going to sit Donovan Peoples-Jones. If you want to start him, fine, but I don't think he's going to do much. Now to the Ravens side of things, Rashad Bateman, Harbaugh said that Bateman, he's close to coming back, and if he does play in this game, I like him. This guy's a solid number 2, 3 receiver for fantasy football. He's got breakaway speed. Him and Lamar Jackson have a good rapport. And this week here, if he plays, he's a definite start. Now to Devin Duvernay. He came off a bad ball game, and if Bateman's out, I still don't like him as a must-start guy. He's a borderline guy at best. I think this Brown secondary is pretty beatable for the most part. We saw the Patriots even go for a lot of yards in the passing game last week. Over 300 yards Zappy threw for, with Devonte Parker a decent game, Myers a decent game, and the rookie Thornton a decent game. So right now, at best though, Duvernay, he's been inconsistent this season. A deep ball or nothing. He's a borderline option. Next ball game, New York Jets at the Denver Broncos. So right here, this Jet team 3-0 with Zach Wilson at quarterback. But these guys haven't done anything. And this week in my drop video, I said drop Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore. The last 3-4 weeks, they haven't done anything. This is a tough matchup versus a good Bronco defense. We just saw them shut Mike Williams down on Monday Night Football. So right here, all Jet wide receivers, I just can't trust them. And this ball game could be a game once again where the Jets offense isn't doing anything besides Breece Hall, and the defense is what's winning them ball games. So right here this week, I'm benching all Jet wide receivers as sits. Now to the Broncos side of things, Colton Sutton, he's their number one wide receiver and pretty much the only guy doing anything in that passing game for Denver. That passing game has been a mess all season long, but Sutton's been the only consistent guy and a solid number 2 wide receiver for fantasy owners. Now to Jerry Jeudy, he caught one deep ball in that ball game and pretty much didn't do much on Monday Night Football, so he's not a guy I could start with confidence each and every week. He's a borderline option at best, but even at that, this is a pretty tough matchup versus a Jet secondary that's come to play over the last month of the season here. And I got Jeudy as a borderline guy, but if you got better options, I would sit him. Now to the Texans at the Las Vegas Raiders. Brandon Cooks, it's been up and down season here for mostly downs this year. So Brandon Cooks, maybe he's losing a step. I know his quarterback ain't great as well with Davis Mills at quarterback. So this week here, I can't really trust Cooks, even in a decent matchup. He's a borderline option this week. Nico Collins, I got to see a little bit more out of him. But the last 2 weeks before the Texans bye week, he was starting to get things going, and he scored double-digit fantasy points in those ball games. But one more week I got to see it before I move him up to a borderline or a start option. So I got him as a sit this week. And now to the Vegas Raiders, Devonte Adams. As long as he's not suspended and he's playing, he's a start each and every week and a top 5, top 10 wide receiver, obviously. Now Hunter Renfro and Matt Collins, I got him as hits. Hunter Renfro, it's been a down year for him. Devonte Adams obviously taking all those targets that Renfro had last year, because Renfro last season, a lot of 20-plus fantasy point games for him. But this year, him and Card just haven't been hooking up. His target share is down. His route running as well is Hunter Renfro. And he's a guy that's been phased out of the offense, I feel like, over the last few weeks. Now to Matt Collins. We know he had that blow-up game in Week 3 at Tennessee, but he's a guy you really can't count on. And he's a guy who's been dropped in tons of fantasy weeks over the last week with the Raiders going into bye, so he is an easy sit this week. The next ball game, Seattle Seahawks at the Los Angeles Chargers. So right now, DK Metcalf and Lockett, I know they're coming off of bad ball games, but these are guys that are locked into your starting lineup each and every week, especially with the bye weeks now. When we saw this Charger defense is beatable in the secondary here. So I think Metcalf bounces back. I think Lockett bounces back. And this is a revenge game in a way for Geno Smith. I know he was on the Chargers as the backup quarterback for a few seasons, but you know he wants to go in there and show them what they missed out on. So I think Geno gets back on track as well. And it all starts with these guys and Metcalf and Lockett. So I got him as starts. And now to the Chargers side of things, Keenan Allen, he was warming up a little before Week 6. So hopefully he plays here in Week 7. And it made sense for him not to play in Week 6 with a short week going into Week 7. So if Allen plays, he's a start. And Mike Williams, even coming off this bad ball game in Week 6, he's a start for me because this secondary in Seattle, they don't really stop anybody. And this game could be a mini shootout to a big shootout, in my opinion. Jordan Palmer, he finally had a good ball game after 3 weeks of doing nothing. But now, if Keenan Allen comes back, or if he don't even come back as Keenan Allen, I can't trust Jordan Palmer as a guy to start in and week out. So I got him as a sit this week. Now on to the Kansas City Chiefs at the San Francisco 49ers. Juju Smith-Schuster finally had a big ball game going over 100 yards and finding the end zone. But it was a fluky type of play where he ran to the sidelines, broke a tackle or two, spinned off, and he housed it. But besides that, Juju hasn't done much this season. But I still like him as a start. Low-end number 2, 3 flex option this week here. San Francisco 49ers, I know their defense has been solid, but Juju Smith-Schuster maybe he's starting to get things going because he got targeted more in this game here with Patrick Mahomes. Marquez Valdez-Scantling and McCole Hardman, they've been inconsistent wide receivers. I know Hardman looked pretty decent versus Buffalo, but these are guys I can't trust each and every week, especially MVS. We've seen the same thing from him in his Packer days. He'll have a good ball game. The fantasy owners will run out there, pick him up, put him in their starting lineups, and then he wouldn't do anything. And this week here in a pretty tough matchup at the 49ers, I can't trust him, and I got him as a sit. Same with McCole Hardman. Now to San Francisco, Deebo Samuel, I got him as a start this week. He's a guy you plug in and play no matter the matchup each and every week. In the last couple weeks, I know he hasn't put up the monster numbers, but still a steady and consistent player. Now Brandon Ayuk, a big ball game versus the Atlanta Falcons. But I think it was a little fluky, those 2 touchdowns. So this week at best, he's a borderline option for me. I know most people are going to go out there and start him at wide receiver with the buys and stuff. but I'm not expecting another 2-touchdown game from Brandon Ayuk. Just looking what he did previous weeks, he really has been quiet until that Week 6 game. Now the Sunday Night Football game, Pittsburgh Steelers at the Miami Dolphins. Deontay Johnson, I got him as a start. Mitchell Trubisky most likely starting in this game with Kenny Pickett in concussion protocol. So Johnson, either way, he's a start each and every week, especially in PPR leagues with the receptions, the small yards I know he gets. But he's a guy that catches the football, and he's good at least for 10 points a week. Now Chase Claypool and George Pickens, borderline options for me in this one. Claypool finally having a big ball game in Week 6, 7 catches, 96 yards, and found the end zone. So a lot of owners going out there and picking him up. And Claypool 2 seasons ago took the league by storm as a rookie wide receiver. But the last year and a half, he really hasn't shown much. But this week here, I still don't have confidence in starting him. Only in the deeper leagues, or if you got tons of buys or injury. And George Pickens, same thing with him. He had a couple blow-up games, but that was with Kenny Pickett. So even if Pickett plays in this game, we don't know what Pickens is going to do. And he's a borderline option at best. Now on to the Dolphins. Tyreek Hill, he's been the best receiver, arguably, in fantasy football this season. In terms of yards, he's up there, coming off a 177-yard game with Thompson and Bridgewater in that game. And now Tua's coming back, but we don't know what Tua's going to do in this game. We don't know how he's going to react to getting hit the first time is Tua and stuff. But either way, Tyreek Hill, it don't matter the quarterback this season. They're finding space for him in this McDaniel offense, and he's making plays, and he's a start each and every week. Now, Jalen Waddle, 2 bad weeks in Week 4 and 5, but Week 6 came back with a monster ball game, 6 catches, 129 yards. And this secondary over there in Pittsburgh is beatable, so Waddle is a start this week. And now to the last game, Monday Night Football, Chicago Bears at the New England Patriots. Right here, I know Mooney came off a 13.80 fantasy day in PPR leagues, but he's a guy I can't trust each and every week. You know, this Patriot team's going to try to take him out in this one. That'll be the game plan. And Justin Fields, he's been one of the worst quarterbacks over the last couple seasons in football. So I got to sit Mooney and Pettis in this one. And out to the Patriots, Jacoby Myers is a solid low-end 2 flex option each and every week. I got him as a start. I know this Bear defense has been playing decent over the last couple weeks here, but Myers I has as a start. Now that Taekwon Thornton has been a big waiver wire pickup this week after coming off a 2-touchdown game. They're going to get him more integrated into the offense, but he's still not a guy I'm going to go out there and say 100% start. He's the 3rd, 4th receiver still on this team, behind Myers, behind Parker, and possibly behind Bourne as well. But this week here, a lot of owners are going to go out there, pick him up. He looked versatile, even had 3 carries in this ball game for 16 yards, but his workload was still small. 4 catches, 37 yards, and 2 touchdowns is what made his day. So I got him at borderline option at best. And Devonte Parker, I know he had double-digit fantasy game, but in last week's game, but he's still a guy I can't trust, and I got him as a sit. So that's Week 7 wide receiver start to sit every matchup of a fantasy football season.